Good morning and good afternoon for some of you. Welcome to this Parking Technology Roundup webinar, What's New and Exciting? And I hope that you all are as excited as I am to hear from my wonderful colleague, Peter Filice, share with us what's new and exciting in parking technology these days. I, as a planner by trade, and by no means a technology expert, but I did want to talk a little bit about why we wanted to touch base on this topic and what so interests me about it. You know, as a planner, I'm endlessly interested in the transition of parking from passive infrastructure to really a driving force capable of helping our clients achieve really big and broad objectives. You know, the relationship between parking and technology has not always been apparent and clear, as demonstrated by these old-timey photos of parking back in the day. I think Peter pointed out to me that says 15 cents parking all day. So that was the pricing back when this photo was taken. But today, the relationship between parking infrastructure and technology has really never been stronger or clearer. And it's so exciting as a planner to see our clients really leverage parking technology advancements to achieve really substantial objectives. Everything from maximizing spatial efficiency to monetary and financial objectives to employee attraction and retention, and even achieving some of our most impactful climate change goals in the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm hugely excited to hear from Peter about what we're seeing in the technology space and how it can help you all, our clients. By way of introduction, my name is Mallory Baker. I provide general oversight and leadership over our planning operations and technology practice in the Pacific Northwest. I've been with Walker for about 6 years and have been a planner for over a decade. And I'm really excited to introduce my colleague, Peter Filice. Peter, take it away.
Hello, everyone from San Francisco, Walker's San Francisco office. I'd love to show you the beautiful view of Nob Hill out the window, but the lighting is kind of not right. So, but it is a lovely day here. I'm very excited to be here with Mallory and share this technology update with you. I've been with Walker for 3 years. Before that, for several years, I was with a parking technology vendor, and I work in our technology group here at Walker. So that was kind of a natural progression for me. What I'll be sharing with you today to start, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper. Given our time, we'll be able to get to an extreme level of depth, but I'll start with some megatrends that I think are applicable, and then you'll notice these themes coming back as we get into the various slides deeper in the presentation. So what's happening in terms of parking technology megatrends in 2022? First and foremost, by the way, I really love this graphic with the mask on the earth, so I thought it was kind of cute and appropriate for these days. But we're seeing strong technology innovation continuing from all facets of parking technology. Lots of adoption of new methods, new networking types, new access methods, the usage of artificial intelligence, leading to the next point. Cloud and AI, or artificial intelligence technologies, are being heavily adopted into parking technology and providing a great deal of new exciting features and capabilities that can be accomplished. We're seeing upgrades in the ability to use digital signage in technology and adopting what has come out of the broader digital signage market for signs that you see on digital billboards and stadiums and even in our home TV environment, and that being adopted. We'll talk a little bit about that. There has, of course, been vendor consolidation. You know, we know that some companies in our parking technology industry have been very acquisitive recently, have probably acquired, in some cases, up to 20 companies. Other companies have merged, and so that consolidation continues. That's something to be aware of. Supply chain issues, unfortunately, have impacted the parking technology industry, just like they've impacted all other electronics-driven industries. This has been particularly true in the area of display technology. However, with all of those new things, it's important to recognize the fundamental needs of the user, right, of your clients, if you're a vendor, remain essentially the same. People want parking to be as frictionless as possible. They want parking technology to support flexibility in pricing and policy so that as needs change, and certainly we know how much they've changed over the last 3 years, the system can adapt. They want the technology to be as easy and intuitive to use as possible. It has to perform well, and it has to be accurate, particularly if it's a parking guidance system. It has to be very accurate. And of course, everybody wants this at an affordable price because it costs money to operate parking facilities, and buying the technology is part of that investment. The last thing, just a little bit humorously, but you'll get it as I go through the slides. The parking industry is one of those industries, the parking technology industry is one of those industries that is very, very addicted to the usage of 2-letter acronyms, 3-letter acronyms, and 4-letter acronyms. And the alphabet soup of all of these acronyms is never ending. It's even tough for me as a consultant technologist to keep up with it. So permit me in advance to apologize if I throw a lot of acronyms at you. I'm happy to take questions at the end if something is not clear. So I've split the presentation into 4 primary parts. We're going to talk first about the area of parking access and revenue control system, or PARCS, and what's happening in this area. PARCS technology is broadly split into 3 main areas. Systems that provide access control, whether or not the parking facility is a revenue facility or not, they basically provide access control. Systems that provide revenue control for paid parking facilities, and then systems that provide validations. And underneath each of these, there are a variety of alternatives or features that can be combined in different ways to make up different parking technology capabilities and to fit the needs of a variety of clients, depending on whether your facility is a public facility, private, a mixture, whether it has only transient parkers or transient and monthly, or whether it might be an event site that has very large crowds coming in and out for major events. So in the terms of access control systems, we have a variety of different technologies that can be used essentially as credentials for people to get in and out of the facility. And we'll talk about a couple of those: proximity cards, AVI tags. See, there's your first acronym, AVI, automatic vehicle identification. Bluetooth or license plates. In revenue control, of course, there's the sort of the old mode, well, not quite as old as the picture Mallory showed with the guy with the little sign, but traditional cashier booth at the entrance or exit of a facility, moving more towards gated systems that simply accept scans or tickets or proximity cards or other methods of getting in and out, and then provide a method of paying, such as a pay on foot machine, or maybe paying at the exit with a card or with Google Pay, moving towards gateless systems that actually don't require people to have gates at the entries, but find other ways to allow motorists to pay for parking, either by space with mobile app, or by other means without paying by space, such as capturing license plates as they enter and exit the facilities. And then validation systems. So when you have a facility, of course, that has retail outlets near it that want to provide validation, there are multiple ways of doing that as well, both online and via actual paper validations that can be used, such as so-called chaser tickets, a ticket you insert after your main parking ticket. So all of these are available from just about all technology vendors in this industry, and they can be combined in ways that provide an appropriate equipment set for a given facility. I mentioned some of the different mechanisms for access that have become available in the market over the last few years. The newest one being what's shown in the center of this slide, which is Bluetooth. But traditionally, access originally was usually provided by a so-called POX card or proximity card, like you see on the right. It's very common. It is the least expensive approach. It does require you, however, to stop at the gate, roll down your window, and approach the reader so that the card can be read by the proximity card reader. So that's a traditional and still very heavily used mechanism. Over on the left, a somewhat newer mechanism uses RFID sticker tags that attach to either the windshield or your headlight, and they are read by an antenna such as this black antenna up on the pole as you're pulling into the entry or exit lane. This allows you to either not stop or to only slow without stopping the at the time the tag is read and the gate rises. Also allows you, if you attach if you affix the tags semi-permanently to the vehicle, to have a little bit better audit control. You can't hand the card to somebody else because it's actually affixed to your vehicle. However, this is a more expensive option. Now, recently, with the advent of Bluetooth in both handheld devices and even in vehicles, Bluetooth has become another option to enable ticketless entry using a credential that's Bluetooth. There are systems that do this today. They are being enhanced further so that they can read Bluetooth more reliably. For those of you who use Bluetooth devices, you know that their connection is distance limited and not always the most reliable. So this is an interesting new technology that's still a little bit in its infancy relative to parking access. In addition, of course, credit card readers and the ability to use a credit card at the exit or in a pay on foot machine. Very, very important to realize that credit card technology is changing and parking is keeping up with those changes. What's changing? Well, the credit card technology has been used in Europe for 20 years, perhaps, is now made its way in anger into the US market. And that is what's called an EMV chip card. So you'll notice that most of your credit and debit cards these days are equipped with a chip on the card, which provides additional security features. And that actually requires a special kind of reader to read a chip card as opposed to a mag stripe card. US credit cards today have both a chip and a mag stripe on them. Eventually the mag stripes are going to go away. If you Google mag stripe cards, you'll see that all of the major credit card vendors have announced phase out programs for when mag stripes will disappear because they're simply not as secure and they can be much more easily skimmed or replicated versus the chip card. And so having readers in all of your devices, wherever you may be reading credit cards, that are able to accept an EMV card is very, very important. And ensuring that those devices have the proper level of payment card industry, which is what PCI stands for, compliancy for security. There's a standard called P2PE, which is point-to-point encryption. That is very important to ensure that credit card users will be safe when they use credit cards in your parking payment machines. And of course, this applies not only to exit stations, but also to pay on foot machines where you're able to pay usually by credit card or by cash. This, you see here a case where this is a cash accepting machine on the left, and this is a credit card only accepting machine on the right. So the ability to mix and match those machines is important. In some particular clients, they have gone to credit card only. This is one of the trends as people are moving away from cash due to a variety of factors. Cash handling machines are more expensive, they're higher maintenance. And of course, with COVID concerns, the ability to do contactless or contact reduced payment with just a credit card or even just tapping to pay with something like Google Pay or Apple Pay can be much more attractive. And so important to kind of track those capabilities. And as I mentioned, the ability to be contactless. We talked about Bluetooth as a contactless technology. Another way to do that is to use tickets that are scanned, as you see on the right, instead of inserted in the machine. That enables you to have a ticket or perhaps an image on your mobile phone that is just scanned and you don't touch anything. And of course, things like near field communication, NFC for short, readers, can enable you to accept contactless payment from your mobile phone or from your card if your card has the tap to pay feature on it, which you can see by, it has a sort of a logo that looks a little bit like a Wi-Fi logo, except it's usually sideways. And that tells you that your card can be used to tap against one of these near field communication or NFC readers in order to pay and without making any contact with anything or inserting your card. So again, much more secure, much more contactless. Now there's an interesting, QR barcode. QRs or barcodes are certainly a mechanism that can be printed on tickets so that again, you don't have to insert the ticket, you can just scan it. So even if you have a ticket-based environment, that can be important. There have been some interesting things lately about payment by QR code. I'm sure many of you have heard about this, where you have more like on-street meters or multi-space meters that control parking and you go to that device to pay. And some people have been known, there's a scam born every minute. And unfortunately, one of the latest scams is people post QR codes that say, scan this to pay. And the QR code actually takes you to a non-parking vendor payment site, and you pay and you end up giving people money who shouldn't have the money, and you haven't paid for your parking. And so some cities have gone to having much more secure mechanisms of doing this, putting up signs, running public education campaigns. You have to be careful when somebody says, just scan this barcode or scan this QR code, to look where it's taking you. And sometimes when we're in a hurry, we don't notice, and then problems happen. In fact, that leads to this, pay by mobile device. So one way of paying by mobile device is to, of course, sign up on the app, pay on the app, and then it generates a QR code you use to enter and exit. The other way is that you go to a location and you scan a QR code that is associated with that parking space or that parking lot. And then it takes you to a payment site and you can pay. Again, that second one is the one where there's a need to be careful that you're really scanning the valid QR code, right? But these mobile payment approaches also allow you to do things like reserve spots in advance. They allow you to reward frequent parkers. They allow you to handle online validations. It's important to understand from a technology standpoint, nothing comes for free. And mobile applications are not something, even though they're free to the user to download the app, there are payments going on in the background. The user may be charged a convenience fee. You as the client may be charged a fee by the app provider. So, if you charge $5 to park in your lot, generally someone who pays by app is going to be paying more than $5 because there's money to be made by the mobile app provider. So it's important to understand there's a cost to convenience, right? And mobile apps, I use them all the time to pay for parking, but there's a cost to convenience, and it's important to understand what that is. At the same time, this is really the way things seem to be going, right? I mean, eventually these mobile payment apps, there are a few people who have these right now where you can pay from your car, from the actual dashboard infotainment system, the mapping system on that, or other apps that can be run where you can pay from in the car. So just important to understand what all the trade-offs are and both the benefits and the costs of doing these approaches. Another technology that's quite powerful and at the same time can be a little controversial is license plate recognition, or LPR for short. So license plate recognition is a function provided by a camera. You can see some LPR cameras here. They're looking at a toll plaza area where people are exiting a parking structure. So you can see that there are various lanes here that accept payment by credit card or prepaid. And these cameras are capturing the rear plate of the vehicle as it pulls through the lane. Now, this technology has advanced quite rapidly. It's become very accurate. There are mechanisms by which you can ensure better accuracy by appropriate camera placement, appropriate illumination of the license plate, and by also providing triggering so that the cameras know when to look for a vehicle. It's not a perfect technology, and they certainly are not capable of detecting 100% of the plates or all the characters on a plate, but it's become quite powerful and quite accurate. Some people install these really as a method of getting better control over understanding when vehicles are coming in and out. It can give you that information for transient parkers. It can give you that information for monthly parkers. And in fact, in the case of monthly parkers, license plate cameras can be used to raise the gate. You use the license plate number as the credential. So as you approach the gate, the camera reads your plate, says, oh, you're a monthly parker. The gate goes up. If you're not a monthly parker, you may have to stop and pay or take a ticket or some other access mechanism. But at the exit lane, a properly configured LPR system, even if you're a transient parker, if you go and you pay for your parking at a pay on foot machine before you go back to your car and before you exit the garage, a properly configured LPR system can raise the gate for you automatically at exit. You'll notice this a lot in modern airport systems. I know our local airport here in San Jose just upgraded their PARCS system, and you pull a ticket when you come in, it captures your plate, it prints it on the ticket. When you leave, if you've gone to a pay on foot kiosk before you go back to your car, when you approach the exit gate, the gate rises. It says, I recognize this plate. Peter already stopped at a machine, and I'm just going to open the gate because he's already paid. So there's convenience features as well as, of course, security features. You know who's in and out of your garage. If you have some scofflaws who have broken gates to get in or out of your garage, you can actually flag those plates and not permit them to be in the garage. And even in more advanced systems, I know one of our local transit agencies here just implemented LPR technology in their parking areas. They're actually looking at it as a security enhancement to know if there are sort of problematic situations where a vehicle that is stolen, for example, has been placed in one of their lots. They'd like to know that. So it has security as well as functionality benefits. Okay, that's about it on parks, just enough to whet your appetite. We're going to turn to topic 2, which is automated parking guidance systems, another acronym for you. This is an FLA, a 4-letter acronym known as APGS. And this is a very interesting technology. This is the industry that I came out of before I joined Walker. Let's make sure we're all on the same page as to what an APGS is. It is basically a network of devices that provides parking availability information and directional guidance to parkers, to motorists at what are called decision points. So sort of wayfinding points where you need to decide, do I enter this garage or not? Now that I'm in the garage, should I go forward, right, left, up, down, etc. It does that by using sensors, which are connected to a network and are networked together. And they track the number of free or occupied spaces. And it displays that on dynamic signage. It may also display it on a mobile app. They can go across multiple parking facilities. Certain kinds of systems, specifically camera-based systems, can incorporate the ability to capture license plate numbers, so you can do Find My Car functionality. They also can capture surveillance video of the parking stalls. And we'll look at some of these additional features as we go along. But this technology has advanced very rapidly in the last 5 to 7 years, from systems that simply use loops to count vehicles to systems that could count by level or by facility, and now to single space systems in the last few years, with the most advanced of those being camera-based. However, before we get into the technology and before we sort of get ourselves enamored with all the technology, there's an important thing about APGSs, which is, the human factor. When you're designing or implementing an APGS, and if you're a traveler, you've seen these in just about every airport, because almost every airport is now putting in APGS systems. But what we like to share with our clients is you have to be able to see the system. In other words, if you hide the signs or you hide the indicator lights, they're really hard to see, or they're too dim, they're not clear, it's not going to do much good, right? Now, assuming you design that well and people can see it, you have to understand it. So what does the red light mean? What does the green light mean? Are the arrows pointing in the right direction? Should I, to tell me, should I turn left or right? Very, very, very importantly, it has to be believable. Accuracy is paramount, and I'll show you a kind of a funny example of this at the end of this section. If an APGS is inaccurate, in my personal opinion, it's useless. What will happen is drivers will ignore it. And then the investment you as a client or developer, an airport, a university, whatever, has made is for naught. And of course, lastly, we have to count on drivers to use it. Unfortunately, not all drivers, even if you have the best designed APGS, not all drivers use it. Hopefully they get used to it and they understand it, and it's clear and easy to understand, and they start to see it as a benefit to help them find parking. When people are looking at putting in APGS systems, they're typically looking, as with any technology, you want to understand what are the business drivers for putting in an APGS. So why would I spend the money on it? So here's a few reasons that are typical. And in some cases, all of these apply. In other cases, they may not. In other cases, only some may apply, as opposed to all 5 listed here. So obviously, the speed of locating parking is very, very important, particularly as the structure gets larger. And as the structure has more what we call decision points, so more places where you can turn left, right, go up and down ramps, the value increases as complexity increases. You can increase the infill of your available spaces. You can provide a system that can be flexible as you adapt your parking structure, expand it, restripe it, et cetera. You may want to use the system to help improve garage security or safety. And of course, you want it to integrate with other systems. So these are all important things that people look at. There are fundamentally 4 kinds of APGSs. There's really 3, but then there's a hybrid. The first is called a facility count. Now that's when you only count the total number of available spaces in the structure. So if you have a structure with 560 spaces, there might be a sign outside at the entrance that says there are currently 490 spaces available to park. And that number goes up and down as the facility fills and empties. There's what's called a level or zone count that breaks the structure into levels or possibly zones or both, that only counts at certain points in the facility and gives you that much information. So how much is available on each level, for example. And then there's what's called single or individual space count. This actually monitors every stall in the facility and gives you the granularity right down to the stall of telling you whether it's available or open. You can also make hybrids of these. So for example, there's a garage here locally that has a level count system, but it also has single space sensors on the ADA or accessible stalls, so that people who are looking for an accessible stall can actually receive information on a sign at each level of how many accessible stalls are available on that level. And then there's actually a blue light over the accessible stalls that helps direct them to those stalls. All the rest of the regular stalls, however, on the level are not covered single space. So that would be a hybrid approach. APGSs obviously can have benefits. That's one of the reasons they're so popular. To the parkers, the patrons, the end users, they address the uncertainty with parking and improve the ability to find something quickly. It's very valuable the more complex the garage is. If you have a camera-based APGS, it can provide you actual car finding capabilities by capturing your license plate. To the ownership or the builder or the developer, it obviously will provide very good information on how the parking is being utilized. You'll know that it is hopefully improving your patron experience. It helps you fill the structure more. Typically, a single space APGS can increase the infill of your structure substantially. And what that might do is allow you as an owner or a developer to avoid or defer new garage construction by basically saying, I know my garage is not totally full. And I know that the system can help direct people to those areas of the garage that are habitually perhaps not utilized and could be utilized better. And single space APGS can assist with that. Now, it's important also to understand the counterpoints. An APGS, generally speaking, is not actually necessary to operate a parking facility. So if you had a paid parking facility, you better have a PARCS system that can help you collect the revenue, right? For that system, otherwise it's not a paid parking facility. Very seldom is an APGS an absolute mandatory requirement. And that's why we always encourage people to make sure they understand the business drivers of why they're going to look at investing in an APGS. These single space systems, although they've become much more cost effective over the last few years, the cost does scale with the number of stalls, right? The facility level counting kind of stop at some point. Facility, you're just covering the facility. The levels, you're only going to scale with the number of levels, but single space scales with the number of stalls. And, these systems can cause driver behaviors to change, hopefully positively, but hopefully not negatively. And sort of the last thing, can you pretty easily detect what's wrong with this picture? So this is actually a garage in the Middle East. If you look at the little writing above the parking sign, you can figure that out. These signs are showing you the same 10 levels of information. So there's a sign for one entrance lane area, and there's a sign for another entrance lane area. Do you notice how the two signs don't match at all? These lanes don't lead to different garages, folks. They lead to the same 10-level garage. You notice the counts are except on level 9 and 8. The counts are the same on those levels. On every other level, they're different. That's a problem. You think a driver is going to believe this? So one thing that we really emphasize in clients that we work with is you've got to make sure your APGS is accurate. You have to have the proper performance specifications written when you acquire an APGS that protect you as a client and define very, very clearly what accuracy means and how it's going to be measured. A good segue from APGS technology in our third area that we'll talk about today is digital signage for parking and wayfinding. So, you know, signage technology, when you say digital signage, it's any kind of electronic display that can show illuminated and changeable content. So, frankly, the display on your old TI calculator, if you're as old as I am, is a digital display, right? It is a digital sign of type. The size of signs ranges. They can be very small. For example, a sign that just says open and closed, to a medium type sign, like a parking count display that we saw earlier, to very large signs, billboards, sports stadium displays, and other kinds of information. All signs have three elements: control, communication, and display. Of course, what the user sees is the display end of the sign, but there's actually technology behind that that provides you a mechanism of controlling and generating content for signs. And then lastly, the signs need some form of encasement and mounting. Very often sign technologies are constructed as modular components that have to be put into a larger case. And we'll see some of the trade-offs of that on a later slide. In parking and wayfinding, signs are used in three areas. They're used in parks and for things as simple as lane open, lane closed signs, traffic control signs for reversible lanes, lot full signs, rate or fee displays. You've actually begun to see some entry stations in park systems that have a display on the side of them. So as you approach the station, it can give you some information about the parking facility. It can have some advertisements on it and so forth. APGSs use these signs to display basically space counts. And that could be for the whole facility, it could be for an area, it could be for a particular aisle. As we get outside the garage, you might use these signs in parking for wayfinding. So we did a large project on a large facility in Omaha, Nebraska, that comprised 5 separate garages in a very large sort of mixed use development, commercial, light industrial, retail. And there were signs away from the structures that told you at an intersection, if you turn left, right, or straight, how many spaces you could expect to find in the garages that you would find on those streets, to the left, to the right, and straight. And so these can be very useful, and a lot of larger city implementations use things like this. For example, the city of Pasadena in California has wayfinding signs that direct you to the garages, and then there's additional digital signage at the garage. Traditionally, what you would see is signs like these. So these are what I often refer to as pre-formatted or digit signs. The sign on the left is actually a pre-formatted red LED matrix that you basically turn it on with a switch and it says deck full monthly only. And then you turn it off, it's dark. So very simple, no variable content. These signs are typically what we call digit display, digit parking signs. They're a module you can insert into an outer encasement. They usually are in 1 or 2 colors, red, green, amber only, or green and amber. They're known for simplicity of control, relatively low cost, but they really can't show variable content. They can only show digits, in some cases, very simple words, like the word full, F-U-L-L. What has started happening is that the technology that has come out of effectively 2 areas, home TVs, and as well as digital billboards and stadium displays, has now been downsized into this more medium-sized signs that are used in parking. So you see here several examples of signs that are made out of what's called a full matrix, full color LED. So if you look at the upper right, this is how these signs are typically built. There's panels that clip together in a weatherproof manner. Those panels have LEDs that are RGB, red, green, blue LEDs that are set a certain distance apart, which is called the pitch. And the lower the pitch, the finer the display resolution. Just like the difference between your 720p, 1080p, and 4K TV at home, it's the same principle, the spacing of the LEDs. And then those can be formatted into all kinds of different sizes. So all of the signs you're seeing here, except for this one, which is a little bit unique, and I'll talk about it in a minute, are basically a matrix of these modules that are clipped together and turned into multicolor signs. So this sign on the right over here, which is I think from Ohio University or Oklahoma University, excuse me, is actually everything on this sign, all the wording, the OU logo, it's all digital. There's no static amount to the sign. This sign is an interesting one from one vendor that actually includes a circular LED matrix display that can be used in a surface lot so you can see it from multiple sides and the content can actually rotate. So regardless of where you are on the lot, you effectively have sort of a 360-degree sign, which is very clever. Okay, last section, and then I'll turn it back to Mallory for any wrap up and questions. So a topic that I think is quite important, and I had the pleasure of presenting on it last year at the SWAPTA conference down in where were we? We were in Las Vegas, is the topic of cloud. So, you know, the IT world, for those of you who follow the information technology market and the vendors who are operative in it, you all have heard the word Amazon Web Services or AWS. You've probably heard about Microsoft Azure, Oracle Cloud, Google Cloud. You know that applications like SAP and Oracle Database and many, many others have all moved to cloud-based architectures. The parking technology market is following that trend, although it's been a little slow to adapt. That pace is now picking up. So let's see a little bit about why this is important. So why should you care? It's like, that shouldn't really matter, cloud-based, not cloud-based, right? Well, it's important to understand that cloud-based is becoming the standard approach in the general information technology world. A lot of parking vendors are adopting it. It may or may not have benefits for your operation. It's important to understand what you're getting. Are you really getting a cloud-based product or something that someone's just calling cloud-based? In fact, there are some parking technology solutions out there that will build themselves as cloud-based, but they may not actually be so. They may just be using a remote server that's off-site, but it's not really based on a cloud architecture. So, buyer beware, caveat emptor. Software as a service is a cloud concept, cloud computing concept that basically says, instead of you buying a dedicated license that you put on a dedicated server in order to deliver your PARCS or APGS system or LPR system, instead you buy a license to that software as a service on a monthly or annual basis. And all of the components or most of the components of the solution are offsite in a cloud, and the application is running offsite in that cloud. So this is a pricing and delivery model where you don't own perpetual software licenses, you don't own your hardware platforms, but you purchase services as needed. So you're purchasing a PARCS service, or you're purchasing an LPR or parking guidance service. Broadly speaking, SaaS divides into four kinds of, the AAS always stands for as a service. It's the first letter that varies what you're getting as a service. It could be software, like an application as a service. It could be a platform as a service. It could be infrastructure as a service, or hardware as a service. And on the right, you can see what falls into these layers. The last one, hardware as a service, is interesting. You say, well, I don't get it. What do you mean? Hardware as a service? Well, what that actually means is effectively, it is a refactored version of if you lease the hardware, you don't really own it. So the vendor comes to you and says, I will provide you all the hardware, but I'll provide it to you on an annual fee basis. I'll maintain it, I'll provide it, I'll upgrade it when it's needed. You don't have to worry about acquiring it. I'll acquire it for you. And that would include the hardware that goes on site, as well as any hardware that goes in the cloud hosting area. So it's important to become acquainted with these technologies because you're going to hear about it. Almost all vendors are moving to partially or fully cloud-based. This slide talks about that migration. Until fairly recently, let's say 2 or 3 years ago, right? Parking technology solutions used totally what's called an on-premises model. So the software and the hardware resided on site at the parking facility or in an IT room adjacent to or connected by network to the parking facility. Now, that approach has certain advantages and it still is used. There are many systems that still run like this. It's easy to touch and see if it's working. It's completely in your control. It doesn't rely heavily on remote communications. There are some disadvantages. You have to find space for the hardware. You have to maintain it, repair it, and occasionally upgrade it. The underlying components of the system, such as the operating system, you have to worry about keeping them current, and you have to spend capital on it. So cloud-based technology has come and has brought initially what's called a hybrid cloud solution. So for example, there are some parking guidance systems that went to a hybrid cloud, which says part of the system runs on site in a dedicated server and part runs off site in the cloud. So that's a hybrid approach. Some vendors, however, have moved completely to a cloud-based solution. So all of the central server and software components are moved into the cloud. The only thing that remains on site are the actual devices that users have to touch or look at. So in the case of a parking guidance system, that's the sensors and the lights that go with those sensors. In a PARCS, it's the entry and exit stations, the pay-on-foot machines. So the physical machine still has to be on site, but all the software is running in the cloud. And the pricing models for those vary. Some of them are an annual recurring SaaS fee, some are a mixture of upfront fees and annual fees. And as I mentioned, some components, it isn't like all the components disappear, right? You still have to have some components on site that the parker is going to interface with. So here's an example in the world of PARCS. There are several vendors who are offering, and the two mentioned here are not the only ones, but these are two vendors who have offered cloud offerings for some time now. Flash is pretty well known for being a cloud-based vendor. TIBA has a hybrid cloud architecture that uses what's called edge computing. So they actually use a small control device that remains on site. So if the connection to the cloud is severed, the system can continue to run. Doesn't require any redundant backup link. But then most of the server components are in a cloud. The parts processing, the payments, the credential validations are done in the cloud, and in all cases. So it's important to understand that there are different ways to approach this, but many vendors, and again, these are not the only two, are moving towards cloud-based offerings. In some cases, exclusively. In other cases, in addition to on-premise offerings or hybrid offerings. What's important to understand is not all cloud solutions are created equal. Cloud is not a panacea. If someone comes to you and says, my solution's better because it's in the cloud, you have some questions you need to ask. First of all, is it really a cloud solution, or are you just setting up a server off-site and connecting me to it, but it's still dedicated to me? Guess what? That's not a cloud, right? Does it use a cloud architecture from a leading cloud vendor, like Amazon Web Services, like like Microsoft Azure, or is it a custom-built cloud built only by the parking technology vendor? Again, the former has a lot more benefits than the latter. You have to understand that cloud solutions are going to be subject to latency of the network because you're now doing your transaction processing offsite. So it's important you evaluate the network connections and make sure you have enough bandwidth so that those transactions happen quickly and they're not delayed. The financial trade-offs of cloud versus on-premises. Remember, on-premises, you buy it once, and then you may have some maintenance expense, but you buy it once. You pay for it once. A cloud-based solution, you will continue to pay for annually. So you have to look at total cost of ownership. And lastly, I can't emphasize this enough. You need to be very careful that you establish the ground rules and a clear understanding with a cloud-based vendor of who owns the data. The data is no longer sitting on site. It's sitting off-site in somebody's cloud center. You should always insist on owning your data, always. It's just not cool for somebody to say, well, since I'm processing your data, I own all your data. It's your parking operation. It's your parking facility. So ownership, security, how is your data secured? Very, very important aspects to understand very clearly. And that's the end of my overview. I'm going to turn it back over to Mallory now, and we'll certainly be happy to take any questions with the remaining time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Peter. What a great presentation. So much information there. If you have questions, just some housekeeping. Unfortunately, we are unable to unmute you in the webinar setting on Zoom. So if you have questions, please put them either in the Q&A portion. There's a button down at the bottom in the Zoom controls or in the chat window. We do have a quick activity on Mentimeter. We just want to hear a little bit from you on what your next right thing is when it comes to parking technology. But please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I'm sure Peter will be happy to answer whatever comes his way. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Peter, could you confirm for me that you can see the Mentimeter screen?
Yep, it's on.
So if folks want to participate in this, we'd love to hear from you. As I mentioned, you can go to www.menti.com and input the code 28057981. And I'll put that in the chat as well. And the question we're asking is, when it comes to parking technology, what is the next step you're hoping to take? So Peter shared a lot of information on what's out there, what's available. I'm sure you're all coming with your own perspectives and ideas about what might improve your parking system. And we'd love to hear a little bit about what that looks like. Peter, we did have a question.
I see it.
And yep. Any breakthroughs? Yeah, regarding guidance to vacant stalls.
This question is from anonymous attendee. That's a that's a great name. So yeah, I'd be happy to answer this. So actually, surface parking lots are I didn't discuss them too much here, but they are part of the parking guidance, automated parking guidance system offerings. There are a variety of options. The most modern ones are actually now using cameras that are placed on luminary poles or on adjacent buildings that monitor the surface lot and actually are monitoring the status of each stall and using video and interpreting that video through either local or cloud-based mechanisms that enable it to tell you not only how many stalls are open, but it also can tell you where they are because it's actually looking at the lot. Now, there are other ways of doing this. You can place sensors in those stalls, ground sensors basically on the pavement. It is another choice. There are some trade-offs you have to be aware of with that, particularly if you're in the snow zone, the snow and ice zone, right? And because those sensors can very easily get damaged in sanding, salting, and plowing. But there are definitely mechanisms to track stalls in surface lots, as well as to count them as a full facility simply by counting entrances and exits. So great question.
You have
I see another
coming
question.
Through. Yeah.
Okay, you marked that one.
Okay.
So this is great. Hello, Mary Catherine. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to meet when I was in Seattle recently. Didn't work out schedule-wise. So let's see, do you have info about payment by use for load zones in an automated way instead of drivers going to pay station or mobile for payment? So load zone payment in an automated way. Interesting. I'm not sure I have any specific solution for that. I will say this. There is some very innovative pilot technologies being looked at in the city of Las Vegas. And if you don't know the city of Las Vegas, I know we'd be happy to make an introduction. We work with them. They have a very innovative set of things they're doing. And I don't think in their case it's for loading zones. I think for them it's for TNC zones, so transportation network companies, Uber, Lyft, and the like, where they have actually started to use license plate recognition to determine validity and stop stand times of those vehicles. So they're not requiring the drivers to use an app. They're not requiring the drivers to go to a station. They are actually monitoring it by license plate. So I wouldn't say it's a generally available technology, but there are some pilots going on. And I know of at least one in the city of Las Vegas. We'd be happy to follow up with you on that afterwards. Great question.
Also, kick that question over to Chrissy Mancini, who's our Director of Curb Management and New Mobility. She might have some ideas as well on what's available.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of technologies that can monitor the curb, but what you asked about, Mary Catherine, was specifically about identifying a person and doing something with that information, not just saying the curb is full. And that's kind of the next step. And that's part of what Las Vegas is looking into, is how to actually identify the vehicle and do something with that information relative to charging, for example.
We are getting some responses on Mentimeter, a bit few and far between, but Peter, any reflections on what we see here? I know that it sounds like we covered the commercial loading permit payment.
So this second one, so free flow LPR with lot counting and ability to reserve spaces and guide patrons. So, you know, I think this is probably referring to gateless, I'm guessing. When you say free flow LPR, that's actually a trade name of an LPR vendor, Genetec. They have a product called Free Flow. And it is a solution that allows you to potentially have an ungated facility and do all the inbound and outbound capture of LPR in order to track permits or to do charging. It actually also counts vehicles. So you mentioned lot counting. There are several clients that we're aware of who are doing this or are planning to do this. I know of one locally. They're not a Walker client, but I just know them locally, is San Jose State University. Completely uses LPR as their entry and exit credential and their basis of charging and counting in their university lots. So it is definitely doable. It introduces some things you need to think about relative to enforcement. Once you go ungated, you have to say, well, now that there's not a place where I stop people from going in and out, how do you enforce? So that needs some thought. That also can be solved with some LPR technologies. And the ability to reserve spaces, if you're referring to a specific space, I think you're probably asking about a space, any space in a lot. That also can be done, again, by integrating this with a park system that is managing availability of space and charging for space in that lot. So great question. And Mary Catherine, I see that you know Brandy. So that's the person I was thinking about. So, and I know her well. Actually, she and I co-presented on cloud technology at SWAPDA that I referred to. Other questions?
Okay. I'm not seeing any. We do have one more question on Mentimeter. If you'd like to give us a little bit more info on what your primary goal is for implementing parking technology, whether to support environmental objectives, customer attraction and retention, maximizing spatial efficiency, maximizing revenues, something else entirely. We'd love to learn a little bit more about why you're interested in this topic. And any other questions or thoughts from the audience we'd love to hear before wrapping up.
Maximize spatial efficiency.
Very popular answer.
I'm just going to guess that might be from someone who's has some knowledge of parking guidance technology. I don't know why I'd say that, but I did not click that one. Okay.
Well, if you missed anything today, or if you'd like to share this information more broadly, we will be sharing a link to the recording of this webinar after we part this afternoon. Peter and I are always available for questions, and I'm sure Peter would love to talk to any of you about these topics. If you get in touch with me, I can talk about planning or our practice generally, but I would not say I'm a wealth of information when it comes to these topics. So please reach out to Peter if you have any more specific questions or comments. And we're just really grateful for your time today. And we are really excited to continue the conversation with each of you.
Yeah, I'd like to confirm the same thing. Mallory and I both spend quite a bit of time in the Pacific Northwest, even though neither of us are currently based there. We are often up there working with clients on projects, both existing and new, and we would love to have a chance to chat with you. Here's how you can reach us: by email, by phone, or you can also view our LinkedIn's. I actually just a small commercial. Speaking of LinkedIn. I just had an article published in Parking Today yesterday in the May edition with a great deal of information on parking guidance system implementation, some of the considerations that you run into at on the ground, boots on the ground level, putting these systems in. If you're a subscriber to Parking Today, check out that article starting on page 36 of the May edition, which again just was released yesterday. So you may find that interesting.
Thank you all so much for joining us again, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.